I get winked at all the time. And I used to just like not realize why, but now I'm like, it's because they think I started it.
Hey everybody, it's Ben. Loving all the activity on the Facebook discussion group, properly called the Tourette's podcast discussion group. Lots of new members. Sophia, the admin, has been giving everybody the grand welcome. Amazing admin, who I have to thank every episode. Everybody else, give Sophia a thank you as well. And if you haven't joined the discussion group, do it. It really helps to flesh out the contents of these episodes. Tourette's podcast discussion group on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook, no big deal. I wasn't either until this discussion group came to be. Really easy to sign up and amazing resources there. But otherwise, I'm generally active on Twitter, on the Tourette's Pod account, which, by the way, so I'm recording this intro pretty well in advance of the air date. So as you're listening to this, I'm kind of in the distant past in a way. The release date of this episode is September 28th, but right now as I speak, it's September 19th. Because I have to plan out some episodes in advance for some stuff I got coming up. But a pretty astounding showing of support for Tourette syndrome just burned up the Twitter feed here. There was an editorial published in a newspaper that had a headline and body text that was pretty inflammatory and offensive to people who live with Tourette syndrome. And when it found its way to the Tourette radar, the community spoke, to put it mildly. There's just so many awesome advancements lately with TS in the public space. You know, television has shown what I think is a better level of portrayal. And of course, Samuel has really been charismatic on America's Got Talent. And, well, but regardless, this newspaper and this opinion page writer tried to make a funny point and did so at the expense of people with Tourette syndrome. And so the response from the community was so strong and powerful that, at least in what I'm looking at right now, it's 10:17 p.m., September 19th. They changed the editorial, changed the language to remove the references to TS. Not apologetically, I will say. And speaking at this point again, I don't know what the follow-up might be or if there are going to be any additional changes or reversals or anything like that. But what I'm seeing right now is this newspaper changed the editorial under pressure to be inoffensive to the Tourette community. It was very cool to see, and I applaud everybody who tweeted and emailed and perhaps even made phone calls to the paper to make it so. So yeah, by the time this episode comes out, I'll be traveling, actually getting married. So my social media channels might possibly go dark for this period of time, but if you have questions or comments, always feel free to email me at tourettespodcast@gmail.com. I'll read them as soon as I can, or take it to the discussion group on Facebook, which again is a really resourceful community of members. Okay, on this episode, we've got Yvette from Alaska, who has an amazing laugh and a lot of important things to say about the workplace and school, and honestly, some really excellent advice for parents if you stick around and see this episode all the way through to the end, which I know you will. All right, here's me and Yvette.
Yeah, so I'm Yvette. I live in South Central Alaska, and I am in my early 20s. I just graduated from college a year ago, 2 years ago, somewhere, something like that. And
Okay.
I'm currently an event planner. I work for a company that runs markets in my area. So it's a lot of coordinating with vendors, lots of phone calls, lots of emails, and stuff of that nature. I'm a manager, so I manage a crew of mostly teenagers also.
Okay.
That's what I do. I have my degrees in English, so I'm a writer. I like writing. I find writing to be easier to communicate through than talking for the most part.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, I was that was my major as well. So, what took you in the more of the marketing direction?
I worked there my senior year of college, and then the year before that also during the summer. It's a seasonal deal, and I just kind of like after I graduated, like, oh well, you can come on, full time, and I was like, oh okay, I'll do that. So I just
nice.
I just kind of I want to get back to my roots and back to more writing, but that just hasn't happened yet. I'm kind of just relaxing after my last year of school. So
Yeah, I hear that. What kind of writing do you see yourself doing?
I don't know. I majored in like English with an emphasis in rhetoric. So not like the Shakespeare side of English. And
Right.
so it would be probably nonfiction. Or things like technical writing, or right now I'm doing newsletters. I write all our newsletters at work and all of our press releases and stuff like that. So probably, not journalism, but something nonfiction.
Yeah, well, that's very similar to my day job now. It's the newsletters and the videos and podcasting and things like that too. But which I didn't see myself doing when I was in college. I thought I was going to do, I don't know, magazine writing, travel writing, all the dreamy stuff that you kind of hope you're going to do when it comes to writing and an English degree and all that. But so, do your coworkers know that you have Tourette syndrome, or are you open about that, or how in touch are you with Tourette syndrome?
Yeah, so it's actually I wasn't when I was in high school. And then as I got older and kind of like accepted it as more of my identity, now all my coworkers know. And again, I manage teenagers. So teenagers think it's just hilarious. And they,
of course,
I don't even like tell them usually. They just, pick up on it. And then I'll be sitting there in our headquarters building at the market, and I'll be like, geez, like my eyes are moving a lot. Like, what's going on? And then I'll look over and one of the kids is sitting there like winking at me. Like, and so just seeing how long it's going to take me to notice that, that the winking's getting worse and things like that, which I don't mind. I'm just like, don't make me do anything with my
teasing,
neck.
Right?
Yeah. It's nothing malicious at all. I just like, there's certain tics, please don't make me start, but the rest of them are fine.
So the eye tic, I mean, is that sort of your lead feature, or what's your spectrum of tics?
It's the eye tic is one of the ones I found. As long as I wear glasses, I always do something with my eyes. I've had glasses since I was about 13 or 14, and I've had a really consistent tic where I like look over the top of my glasses. It's morphed to, I do this thing where I like look over and then like hold my pinky up and like look at my pinky to a certain extent. But yeah, it's mostly eyes. I do this whenever there's like a bright light. I like have to look at the bright light. So I was like not going to watch the eclipse or anything. So like that could be very bad.
So that tic in particular, is that the kind of thing that you have to perform exactly right for you to satisfy yourself and move on, or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them are like that, where it has to be a certain amount. I do vocal tic also. I didn't until or I didn't like noticeably until like my sophomore year of college. And actually really vividly remember my very first like vocal tic that I was really aware of. I'm sitting in class, and it was one of my like upper level, like 300 level English classes, like history of the English language or something. And I've got like 15 minutes left. It's where you had to take like really intense notes. And I'm sitting there and all of a sudden it hits me. I was like, I really, really need to like make this really loud, like high pitched, like shrieking noise. And I was like, oh wow. No, like I'm sitting in this class and I've got 15 minutes. So it would be weird to like walk out now, but it would be really disruptive to make this like really loud noise in the middle of this class. And so I just waited it out. And I was like, the entire time at that point, you lose focus, to anything else that you're doing. I was just like, please don't please don't do it. Please. Just like, it was horrific. And so I leave the class, it's out. I'm like, okay, thank goodness there's this like bathroom upstairs in this building that was never, ever had any people in it. So I'm like, okay, that'll be great. A perfect place. I'll just go up there and they'll be fine. I walk in there and there's like 9 other people in this bathroom. I was like, oh no. And so I ended up just like outside the building, and I was like, you know what? Like, forget it. I'm just gonna do it. So I just stood like behind this pillar, and it's that like this squeak, but like really loud. And and so I just did it, and like for like 3 or 4 minutes, and then I was like, okay, I feel better. It was, and that was my very first like real like vocal tic experience, and it was rough.
God. I bet at that point too, you were about to scream for sincere reasons, just out of frustration. I mean, so How old were you again? Or when
That
was this?
was sophomore year in college. So what, like 20?
Yeah.
Maybe something like that.
So did tics kind of develop, well, how young were you when you first noticed tics of any kind?
I was probably about 6 or 7. I
Yeah.
actually remember this
Okay.
very clearly. I live in a cul-de-sac, and so I was walking like back across the cul-de-sac from my friend's house to my house, and I remember just like stopping and kind of like tilting my head and going, "Geez, I'm swallowing a lot. Like this is really strange." And then
Yeah.
being 6, I was like, "Oh, whatever," and just and just like kept on going about my day. But I distinctly remember that, like, geez, like why am I swallowing so much? So that was
Yeah.
my first memory.
What about, I mean, what did your, what was the household situation, parents and observations of the people around you?
Yeah, so my parents are divorced, and they divorced right about the time I was right about that age, actually, like 7. And
Yeah.
my dad was just kind of like, he noticed, I'm pretty sure, but was just like, well, this is just the way my kid is, right? Like she's just like twitchy and it's fine and whatever. And my mom noticed and was like, because what she noticed first was my neck jerking tic, which is, by the way, one of the most painful tics ever. And she noticed my
Yeah.
neck jerking tic.
Yeah.
And took me to my pediatrician. And my pediatrician said, "Oh, well, it's obvious. She's got allergies." And
Allergies.
yeah,
Yeah.
allergies.
That's,
And her throat must be really bothering her, so she's just like stretching her neck to like relieve the allergies. Oh, and she's like rolling her eyes a lot. Her eyes must be bothering her because of the allergies. So I end up on this like
right.
allergy medication. And I didn't, until talking to my mom later, I didn't even make the connection that I was at the doctor for these movements I was doing. I just thought I was just at the doctor because I had
Huh.
allergies.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, and I was like, now I'm like, allergies? Like these are year-round allergies.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Well, yeah. So, I mean, how long did it take before you went back for, a follow-up diagnostic when you guys, it looks like this is an allergies. What is it?
yeah, believe it or not. So I went to that same doctor. My pediatrician at the time was like semi-retired, so I had 2. And I'm pretty sure I went to
Hmm.
both of them, and I didn't like go any further until I was 13. So there were, good years there, like 8 years where I just didn't know like really what was going on. Well, not 8 years, 6 years.
Wow.
And what happened, I was homeschooled. And my 7th and 8th grade years, I
Okay.
had a writing tutor. And we would go over to her house, and my mom was talking to her at one point, and my writing tutor's daughter had Tourette's. And
Oh, really?
I know, was diagnosed with Tourette's. And so she's talking to my mom and going like, yeah, my daughter, she was making these weird movements and she was rolling her eyes, and I'd get her in trouble for rolling her eyes, And then I took her to my pediatrician, and her pediatrician knew what it was and sent her to a neurologist. And my
Oh,
mom's going,
okay.
that sounds really familiar. Like, I'm getting my kid in trouble for rolling her eyes, and she's telling me it's not on purpose.
Wow.
And yeah, so that it was at that point that we finally had like, oh, like there's now a name for this weird thing that I'm doing.
So
And
did that feel good to you, or I mean, was there some sort of sense of relief in just the identity, or was it kind of like a newfound fear, or I mean, just kind of take it from there?
well, I didn't really identify with it at that point either. And what happened is my mom got an appointment with my tutor's pediatrician, and just went in and said, hey, I think my daughter has Tourette's. And so that pediatrician gave her some pamphlets, and then sent us to a pediatric neurologist.
Hmm.
Alaska's so small population-wise
Yeah.
that at the time we had one pediatric neurologist, and he didn't really see like there's the neurologists don't see a lot of cases of Tourette's usually because it's just like such a small population. And
Sure, yeah.
so we go in there, and the visit was not helpful. He basically was like, oh, well, you just got some extra movement and you'll grow out of it by the time you're 18. You know, it'll be fine. Let's put you on some pills and it'll be fine. You'll grow out of it, whatever. And so I left thinking like, well, this isn't really that big of a deal, right? Like, it's just like this little bit of extra movement, like no biggie.
Right.
Yeah. And he put me on this really low dose, blood pressure medicine, and I took myself off of it after like 2 weeks.
What was happening with the meds?
They were, and I realized that, you know, some people like really need meds and they can be very helpful. But in my case, they were like slowing me down. And I kind of describe it like, yes, they probably help with the tics because everything was slowed down. Right. Like I was like mentally and physically, I just felt like a haze over my brain, and it was just not good. So I went off of them and then never went back to that neurologist. I just didn't have a good experience. It was very unhelpful. And also I didn't grow out of it.
Yeah. I mean, that seems to be the sort of message that a lot of parents or people who go to get diagnosed themselves get, you know, when they're young. That's like, oh, don't worry, you know, it's just a childhood thing. You're going to grow out of it. It might, you know, spike here and there, but once you get into your teenage years and find the things that you like to do and all that, you'll just kind of flatten out. Don't worry about it. And I think maybe because that is such conventional wisdom is why there is a lot of, you know, with the whole Tourette conversation and media focuses, a lot of it is kind of geared toward children, and I get it. And there should be a lot geared toward children. There's not as much geared toward adults unless they're very, very extreme. And how old were you at this point? Like, remind us when that little period where you took the meds and got off it. And
I was 13. And I was actually, 13. And I transitioned to a charter school where I was like going to school because I was homeschooled up until that point.
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I went into my new school knowing that I had, what the neurologist told me I had was chronic tic disorder, because I didn't, at that point, none of my tics to him were presenting as vocal.
Right, yeah.
And which obviously now I do have vocal tics.
Right.
But yes, I went into school with just knowing in my head, I was like, well, I've just got this thing, this chronic tic disorder, and it's not a big deal. And so it was never, I like completely like didn't acknowledge it, just kind of like cut that part of myself off from my like personal identity.
I relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually felt really bad about this interaction, but I had, this school was super small. There are like 200 students, and one of the kids in like my class actually has Tourette syndrome. And so I get this Facebook message. I'd been in the school like a couple months probably. And I get this Facebook message, and it's, you know, I know it's none of my business, but do you have Tourette syndrome? Because I have it too. And I felt horrible. I was so mean. I was like, I wrote back and I was like, yeah, well, it is none of your business. And I technically have chronic tic disorder, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my gosh. So you see like 14-year-old me not identifying with this at all. Like, no.
Wow.
I felt so bad. Well, now, not then. I didn't feel bad then.
Well, so, I mean, was that the end of the discussion with this student?
Not, well, at the time, yes. We ended up, they were in my class, like in my school, my entire high school career. And again, with 200 students, you end up interacting with everybody. And so, no, we ended up talking later, like several years later. And he's actually the one that I like Facebook messaged as soon as I had that vocal tic experience in college. I was like, hey, so now I got a vocal tic.
Following up.
Yeah. But no, and I'm still good friends with him. I just, we didn't talk about it that year, or we didn't talk about it again until I brought it back up like years later. when I was kind of starting to realize that this is something that I was going to have to deal with eventually because it wasn't going away.
Wow. So at the charter school, being 14 again, was it your policy at that point to just not talk about it, or were you kind of, bottled up about it, or were there other people that you kind of discussed this with, or?
No, it didn't really come up. My family knew, but it didn't really come up then either. My mom didn't have much more information than I did. So, so she wasn't really able to like tell me any more about what I was dealing with than I kind of just knew from personal experience.
Right.
It would come up because I had this terrible, terrible neck jerking tic. And like, it was even as early as 13. And my neck would just like spasm and hurt really, really bad. And so it only came up in terms of like pain.
Yeah. So what more specifically, what was the actual tic? Like, what did you do?
I would like twist my neck to the side and like pull, I guess. It's really, I actually don't do it anymore, thank goodness. And so it's hard to explain, but it would be like a sideways, like jerking movement. And of course you have to do both sides so it evens out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and it was something like that I would do like over and over again. And it was really painful.
And just curious, because I'm doing something right now that's kind of, it feels like it's what you're describing. Like if I saw you do it, would I see sort of the neck muscles on the side kind of pop out and stretch out a little bit, or almost like where it kind of joins your shoulder a little bit? I mean, that's what I do. I'm doing it now because we're talking about it. I've done it in a long time, but you're right. Yeah, you got to even it out so it's even on both sides. And I mean, yeah, it's funny how there are rules to this thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so this is going to be one I'm picking up into the night, I have a feeling. So I mean, your tics are still, were they visible to the people around you, to where they were asking questions, or teachers? Were they kind of trying to figure out what was going on, or?
People didn't really it didn't really come up. People didn't really ask me questions. Children did all the time.
Yeah.
But because, they're children and they notice things, and I would tell them, just like what was going on, but not really my peers or adults or anything. I think what was happening is I wasn't taking as much when I was in school. Because I don't, and of course, thinking back on memories, you don't usually remember what you were taking. So I couldn't tell you for sure, but I must have been like redirecting or suppressing or something. Because I know I did redirect. I've got this memory of this conference that I went to when I was about that age, about 13, 14. And I'm at this conference, and they're doing stuff on the stage, and it was like stuff you really need to watch. And my eye tics were so bad that I could not focus on what they were doing. I couldn't see anything. And and so I'm sitting there, and I was sitting cross-legged, and I started like shaking my knee or tapping my fingers or something, doing something with like enough movement that I was able to make my eyes sit still and watch. And like when we were sitting at the table, I would like bounce my leg really furiously to make it so that I could like see enough to eat and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I know I was redirecting, but I don't know if I was doing it at school.
Well, so what else do you do to, I mean, when you really feel something coming on, are there other ways that you try to intercept, or, are there certain go-to activities, say like, you're not at a conference, you're at your house, or, just, is there anything therapeutic that you do routinely?
I usually just go with it at this point. There's nothing really, when I'm like really stressed out, I like clean compulsively. But I don't think that's tic related. No, sure. I mostly just go with it and just like let out what I need to let out and then move on. And even at work, I don't mask at work either.
Okay. Well, that's great. I mean, so is it because you've kind of, it's self-acceptance and you're fine rolling with it, or is it more just I don't want to do medication. I tried it before, it didn't go well. I'm just going to roll with what I got. I mean, which kind of direction are you?
I think it's both. Well, it's really at this point, it's part of my identity.
Yeah.
At this point, I will, if people ask me, I will gladly tell them. Everybody at my job knows. I work in for a small business and in a really small office building, so we can all hear each other. And I totally just like tick at work. Sometimes
Nice.
it's even difficult, like answering the phone when I need to talk to a vendor on the other side. And like, even those 5 minutes sometimes are really rough, like not making any noise. But the rest of the time I don't mask my tics at work or anything of that nature. So, which has taken a while for me to get to this point. But, so I think, it is a lot of it self-acceptance.
So was it after college that you kind of reached that level of comfort, or, I mean, did it coincide with the job and I mean, how did that come together?
It was it was right about the time I started vocal ticking pretty badly, because then I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Really, up until that point,
right.
With this movement, oh, well, I got something in my eye, or
right. Yeah.
Or stuff of people just assume too, stuff of that nature. Or they just think you're winking at them, which is kind of awkward, but okay too, I guess. I get winked at all the time, and I used to just not realize why, but now I'm like, it's because they think I started it.
Right. Yeah. Reciprocating.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, has it created, I mean, that's one example, I guess, of the question I was going to ask, but has it presented any sort of problem for you with people who maybe don't understand what's happening, or with people you work with professionally, not in your office, but just, kind of on the outside? They're not used to your tics or your routines or anything like that, and it's been awkward or weird, or they've handled it oddly or anything like that?
I have this one story. I worked one of my best, favorite jobs ever. I worked at a writing center in college and did tutoring and stuff, and it was fantastic. And I had somebody at the writing center. I was sitting there, because on our off time we could do homework or whatever we needed to do. And so I'm sitting there doing homework, and must have been looking out the window a lot, because again, this light thing, if there's anything light, I'm looking towards it and blinking towards it. And the person sitting across from me was is there something interesting out that window? And I was trying to do homework, so my first reaction was, oh no, no, there's nothing, there's nothing going on. And they were like, well, you really keep looking towards it. And inwardly I'm like, oh no, I need to have this conversation. And so I was like, actually, I've got this thing called Tourette syndrome. And I explained it a little bit. And then I tell this anecdote. I'm like, well, and everybody thinks I'm winking at them. And this person sitting across from me kind of lights up, and they're like, oh, well, I had this significant other, and everyone thought that they were winking at people too. And so I'm like, oh, we've got this connection. And then this person goes, yeah, well, and then they stopped our drugs and the winking went away. And I'm like, oh no. I was like, just to clarify, mine's genetic. And the whole place just gets dead quiet. And I was like, I'm sure it was a well-intentioned comment, or just not thinking, but I was like, no, not drugs.
Oh man. Well, yeah, I guess somebody expressing some level of care. But I was thinking too, so being homeschooled, I'm thinking back to when I was, elementary school age. I went to private school, didn't really go so well. To public school, I guess it was a little bit better, but as far as just my study habits and how standardized things were, and I didn't take well to an academic environment. Just school was not my thing. Once you went over to charter school, and I understand that charter schools are not just one category. I mean, they can differ pretty wildly stylistically, how they teach and everything. But did you find yourself adjusting pretty well, or were there any issues like that when it comes to learning or styles of education? Or
Yeah, so I am a very studious person by nature.
Yeah.
And even like I just like sit down and put in the work, even if I have to like read over lines multiple times because my eyes are doing whatever they want to.
Hmm.
And I went to a standards-based charter school. So basically there's, we, the students, see the rubric and the standards and know exactly what you need to do to meet each standard. And I excelled in that environment. I really, really liked it. It allowed me, I was able to, work at my own pace. And it was really unstructured. I mean, students were like walking in between classrooms all the time and like getting out and moving. You'd work in the common areas, you'd work here and there. So it let me, like, if I needed to get out and go like for a walk and kind of stretch my legs and get some tics out and stuff, I could.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you needed a hall pass. You would just go and wander, and it was really great as far as it was a little looser than like the traditional like bell to bell public school that you think of. And it was really great for me. And it was the flexibility I really needed. But at the same time, I had certain things that I needed to meet each year in order to move on to the next grade level.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, obviously a school has to have, some set of criteria for it to be meaningful, but yeah, I mean, that's the key, that flexibility and just that sort of air to breathe, which is not what I had when I was younger. And I think that created, stressful situations, deadlines, which I must have been a glutton for punishment because I went into journalism. That was, you got the deadlines and you got the late nights and it's stressful and it's kind of a thankless job and people are yelling at you. And, my tics would just go crazy in those times. The 11 p.m. deadline, I mean, that's where it was bad. And luckily it was kind of an empty office at that point. So I could kind of let loose a little bit, but that seems to, I mean, that's just having that flexibility, I think is really, really key to where nobody's snapping their fingers at you to have something done for them. I get a lot of emails from parents kind of asking, what's the appropriate environment or, anything I can recommend to my son or daughter's teachers at school when we explain to them that they have Tourette syndrome and that seems to be kind of the key. I mean, you don't, and I guess some people may view it as sort of preferential treatment or maybe not fair to other kids. But I mean, yeah, this is a special consideration. And I'm glad that, you can offer that as an example. And that's something that did legitimately help you to where you like studying, you're studious, you like hard work and, you enjoy yourself in your workplace. And I mean, that's not a bad outcome.
I'll tell you too, I love seeing parents like in my, I'm part of a couple Tourette's Facebook groups and stuff too. And I love it when parents are like, how can I help my kids? Like I'm realizing that, my kid has Tourette syndrome and how can I make like a better environment for them and stuff. I love it because my parents had no idea and they didn't have anyone to turn to ask or anything. They just totally winged it. So.
Yeah. Well, it's hard for parents to, I love it too when I get emails, and they've been coming in daily lately since season 1 ended. I think a lot of new people have discovered it, and it's gotten around a little bit more. So the emails and the correspondence has picked up quite a bit, but a lot of it is coming from parents lately. So being part of Tourette groups, are you sort of in on the activism part of it, or what kind of drew you to that? Was it just the sense of community, or you wanted to get something done for other people who had Tourette syndrome?
Honestly, just a sense of community. It was really like,
that's great.
I just like within the last couple of years have really like given myself that label. And so it's hard to be an activist or something that you're not like quote unquote out about, especially like nothing on my social media is about Tourette's. I mean, nada, besides these couple groups I've been. I don't say it on social media. It's my family and my parents who have even told my extended family. It's not something that I, even now, even though I'll totally answer questions that people ask me, it's not something that I like actively spread about myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, and yeah, I mean, it's the same with me. There was no sense of community or awareness or activism or anything like that for me until this year. I mean, it started with this podcast, and I'm 38 now. So, I guess it's never too late to want to get involved. it took me a very long time to get to the level of acceptance that you have with yourself. And I think that's great. I mean, if there are to be takeaways from that, and I know for a fact that there are people listening to this who aren't there yet. I know because I talk with them. They, this is the first time I've ever told anybody I have Tourette syndrome. My parents know, my sister knows, but they're sworn to secrecy. I don't tell people about it because I'm worried that I'm not going to get a job or get a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever. And reaching that level of comfort that you have, what advice do you have for people like that?
Oh, I don't know if I'm qualified to give advice, but I don't know. It's something that really takes time. And I know at least in my family, we've always kind of approached it with a certain level of humor, which has been really helpful. Right. It's not something that I'm embarrassed about. It's not something that they laugh at me for, but it's something that we kind of laugh at it together. Because it is funny. Yeah. I mean, some of the random noises and stuff, I mean, it can be entertaining. And so I think that's a step two, is to not be as self-conscious. Because I was really self-conscious when I was like a teenager. And I think the first step is just kind of, self-acceptance. And the more, like, just naturally, the more you gain, like, confidence and kind of know who you are in yourself, the more I'm not saying this right. Anyway, the more you just kind of learn that that's just a part of yourself. Like, it's not my defining characteristic by any means. But it's something that I have and that I just was kind of forced to deal with because I can't hide it. And have found that hiding it is painful and distracting and not a way that I want to like live with my life. If that makes sense.
So you were totally qualified to answer that question. I mean, that was really perfectly said, and especially that piece at the end. I mean, you're right. It becomes such a bomb on the inside to want to hide from it forever. And I mean, I think with me, I was just fed up with myself, and I was like I'm not a little kid who has to worry about social problems it's just why am I still kind of hiding from this? It's just, I know the people I know, they know me, and it's different for maybe someone who's, 13, 14, 15, because when I was at that age, that is when I made the conscious decision to just kind of go inward, because it can be really difficult and there's a lot of fear and anxiety. But I mean, you don't want to carry that forward into your adult life. You can strategize with yourself and make the decisions that you want to make for yourself. But it's important to do exactly what you did, which is find community. No matter at what point in your life you do it. I mean, just start there, because it just seems like the Tourette community there's no shortage of people who want to help you along the way. And that's definitely what I found. And and exactly, I mean, case in point, the question I asked you answered it in a way that other people haven't answered it when I've asked that question. And I like it that everybody kind of has a different correct answer to that question about self-acceptance, or just dealing with something internally, or masking tics, or, what do I do when I tell my boss, or do I tell my boss, or that sort of thing. It's just that I think it's kind of encouraging that there's no one way to do this, and you can come out the other side relatively unharmed and actually feeling a sense of relief. And that's definitely what I have. And again, I'm not 15 years old. I'm pushing 40 now, and it feels good in a way that did not feel good, say, a handful of years ago. It's a first step toward being just kind of free with who you are, and you don't have to make that decision immediately. It's nice to be able to arrive at that point at some time in your life.
It's really nice. And teenagers, I mean, as a teenager, you've got so much going on, like internally, and there's so much happening, and you want to fit in, and you want people to like you, and you don't even know who you are. And so it's kind of like, it makes sense that teenagers are like, no, I'm just not going to deal with this particular part of myself because I don't know what the rest of myself is doing either.
Dead on. What haven't we talked about? There may be some things I didn't even know to ask you, or that's been on your mind. What haven't we covered?
I will say, well, when I texted my dad and said, like, hey, I'm going to do this podcast, and my dad said, well, if you're going to tell a story, tell them about my quote unquote superpower. And so this is, so I'll tell my dad's story about his superpower. So around the time of the neck stretching tics and such, I was like putting myself in an enormous amount of pain. And this is where I really realized that I'm very susceptible to like suggestion and stuff whereas tics are concerned. Not only do I copy other people's noises and movements, but I also just like if people say things. And so I'm at my dad's house and I'm just like really ticking and with my neck. And my dad goes, well, so let's just try something. Like, what do you think would happen if I told you to move this tick someplace else? Like, what do you think would happen? And I go, well, I don't know, but you can try it. And so he goes, Yvette, instead of ticking with your neck, I want you to wiggle your toes or something. And and it worked for like a good 15 minutes or something. It worked. And so as I got older, Dad would just mess with me, be like, oh, well, why don't you start nodding your head, or why don't you start this?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Simon Says.
Yeah, and so Dad's like, yeah, so I learned not to like abuse the superpower because it can be really annoying to have someone like messing with you.
Yeah. That could be a brutal power to have, where you're lucky you have a dad who respects you.
Exactly. Yeah. But so that's my dad's superpower story. But I do it too. Like if I hear the word snort or something like that, I'll do it.
God, well, I mean, have you shared this story on with the groups that you're part of? And I mean, have you found? I've never thought about that. I mean, have you found anybody else who has kind of received it the same way, or has that same like susceptibility? Or
I don't know. I haven't shared that really. And Dad was thinking, it's because I like really look up to him and stuff, and I like really listen when he talks. But it's not just him.
Yeah.
Like again, like if I hear certain things, if I like picture certain things in my mind, it'll conjure certain tics. And I haven't really heard that. No.
Okay. Talk more about that, about picturing things in your mind.
So there's this like horse blowing tic, which I think I'm going to do now because I just, like where you like blow your lips out.
Yeah. And forgive me for asking this stuff because it's, it's clearly, it's leading to tics, but I mean, yeah, that's kind of the way it goes with these conversations, I guess.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've given you neck tics. Now I'm doing this weird horse blowing thing.
Yeah. Sometimes I've heard people describe their tics, especially the more interesting ones, like a neck tic or something, to where, and we talked a little bit about this earlier about getting it right, but there's also, it feels like a specific goal, and you either know what it looks like, or you know what it feels like, or there's some kind of shape that corresponds with it. I mean, does anything like that happen with you when you're doing, like, for example, your neck tic or any sort of like mouth tic where you're making some sort of physical sound?
There is like a certain sound that you go for, or a certain volume that it needs to like with that tic I had in that classroom. Like I knew, and I can't tell you how I knew, but I knew that it needed to be loud. And I do like I have this like snorting tic, and if I do it softer, it needs to be like more, like it's like instead of being loud, it's quieter and then more times. And so if I'm in like a really quiet place, I'll do that. I'll do it instead of, and so I can do that, and I can like substitute things like that. But as far as I don't see shapes, and I have been thinking about this too, and I really don't think that I see shapes or visualize anything.
Here's the question that, I haven't asked it to everybody, but, sometimes I can sense what the answer is. But just if you didn't have Tourette syndrome, I mean, you can either answer the question of what kind of person would you be, or, if you could choose between having Tourette syndrome and not, I mean, has it done you any disservice to the point where you feel like, forget this, I could go on for the rest of my life without ticking again? Or do you just, I mean, are you there? You're there with it. You don't mind it, or what is it?
So I actually, if I could take a magic pill and get rid of the Tourette's today, I absolutely 100% would. I do think that it's made me a more understanding person, and it's made me a more like sensitive person. I think that I really connect with people who have things like OCD and other disorders. I think that I can really understand where people are coming from better. But I absolutely would. I think I can be a sensitive, understanding, empathetic person without Tourette's. Yeah, and without the pain and stuff like that. So absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair way to say it. It comes down to the pain. It has nothing to do with. I mean, so do you think you would? And you did just kind of say this, but as far as having that sense of empathy and that sense of appreciation and all of that, I mean, if you didn't have this in your background, do you think you would be kind of the same person as far as the mode of living and how your brain works? And
I was so quick to say I get rid of it, but now I don't know. Now I don't know the answer to that question as much.
The pain is a very legitimate answer, I think.
And that's the reason. I've also it stopped me from doing things occasionally. Like, I'm a natural introvert, and so sometimes I just need an excuse to stay home. But other times it's I've not gone to movie nights if my vocal tics have been really, really bad, and I felt like I would really disrupt things and stuff like that. So I would hope that I would be more outgoing and go to more things if I didn't have my tics. But I don't know that that's true. That could just be my personality.
Do you observe other people? I mean, are you kind of a people watcher when it comes to mannerisms and then kind of weighing yourself against that? Because I do that all the time because I'm the same way. I mean, I'm not an extremely social person. When I'm in a professional environment, I kind of shift into professional mode, I guess. But I don't have the same sort of outgoing kind of everyday mannerisms that I observe in a lot of people. And I'm really fascinated by it. And maybe I do kind of wish I had that. I totally don't. I feel like I'm completely awkward in comparison. I mean, do you compare yourselves to other people in that regard and think about Tourette syndrome in that framing?
I do. I don't necessarily think about it as tics, but I think about it just as personality, right? Some people can just walk into a room and just get to know everybody. My brother's like that. Everybody is his friend. And not everybody is my friend. He just walks into space, and it's the party gets started when he gets there.
Right.
And so I think I was that would be kind of nice, but it would also, for an introverted person, be really, really exhausting. Last thing, this just popped into my head. I do want to talk about being around other people with tics and kind of sharing tics and it making, your tics worse, which it absolutely does in my experience. And
right, yeah.
This is a work story too. At my job at the writing center that I mentioned earlier, we would sit down and do, consultations with people for their writing, and they're 30 minutes tops. That was our cutoff. They had to be under 30 minutes. And I was one of the only tutors there, and this person walks in and signs in, and I start, doing the consultation with them. And about 3 minutes in, I realized that this person has tics. And I think that they were, I don't think it was Tourette's, but it was something where they were making movements, and I go, oh no. And I just
hello, new tic.
Yeah, exactly. And mine got worse, and I started feeling the need to do these vocalizations and stuff. So now I'm distracted, trying, not to do that in this really quiet, writing center setting. And, and I barely got through it. And after that, I was like, okay, that can't happen again. This is no offense to anybody who's twitchy who comes in, but I can't do it. So I went and I talked to my boss and the supervisor of the writing center. And I walked in and I go, hey, so you may have figured this out already, but I have Tourette's. And she looks at me and she's like, no, I didn't know that. That's kind of how I introduce things too. I just drop it. I just it'll just casually mention in a conversation at work and then see if anyone picks it up and wants to have the conversation. But yeah, I have Tourette's, and then I went on to explain that this experience I had with this student. I was like, I have to tell you right now, if someone walks in and I notice them being twitchy, I think I'm gonna just have to pass. And I think like if I'm in another situation like this, I like to be able to like tap out, so to speak. And she goes, that would be like, that's no problem at all. Just if you ever feel like you need to go tick or something, just have another writing tutor take your place. And if you need to pass on somebody, I mean, I'll totally get it. And that was awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Like, wow, that was one of the best like work experiences with Tourette's I've ever had. She was just like, oh yeah, no issues amazing. At all. I mean, just, yeah, whatever you need to do to be comfortable, do it. Like, wow. I never had to take her up on it, but it was really nice to know that I could if I needed to.
It's that flexibility again. It's that breathing room,
Exactly. It was awesome to just be able like, oh yeah, just whatever you need to do.
Well, this has been so fun talking, and I'm going to be doing your neck tick for the rest of the night. And
you're welcome.
So I appreciate that. But no, this has been really great. I mean, do you have any final thoughts or final words? I mean, we've kind of gone through it, but I don't want to cut you off if there's anything else on your mind.
The last thing would be just like a word to parents. Like, as long as you're like understanding and accepting and stuff, it's really difficult to screw it up. My mom would actually get me in trouble for my eye blinking and stuff before she realized it, and I'm okay. So. Yeah, I know she really beats herself up sometimes over. I had to actually ask her if I could say that on the show, because I know that it's something that she's not proud of, and she's apologized to me before. Like, I'm really sorry that I would like get you in trouble for something that you can't control, or that I didn't have more information for you because I didn't have it. I was like, she was working with what she knew at the time.
Right. Yeah.
And I absolutely begrudge her nothing. I mean, I have great parents, and I've turned out okay, I think. So
there are a lot of parents who are really going to appreciate that. If you don't overthink it, give some breathing room. Yeah, just be supportive. Just be there for them. Be a friend.
Yeah. Don't beat yourself up. Don't. And I know my mom asked the neurologist when we went in. She was like, so this happened about the time we divorced. Like, did I cause this? Like, did this divorce, like, cause this in my child? And it's like, no, it's genetic. My sister's got, she's a little bit ticky. My brother twitches a little bit. It's like, it's genetic. It's just, if you didn't cause it, you're doing just fine.
Thanks for listening. Keep the discussion going. Gigantic thanks to Yvette for taking the time to be on this podcast. Send me your feedback in an email or a voice memo, which you can email to tourettespodcast@gmail.com. Or again, the Facebook group awaits you. Back next week with another episode, and it's going to be really, really good. I just finished editing. Really excited about it. So we'll talk to you soon. This is Ben.